Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me today for today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about scaling AI at work, and we're going to be talking a lot about responsible strategies for legal counsel and leaders. My name is Joanne Chenn. I work in the strategy and legal operations team here at LegalVision. What that really means and why I'm speaking with you today is that I am responsible for our AI transformation projects here at LegalVision, how we embed, roll out, implement AI across our firm really sits within my portfolio. So I'm hoping today we can kind of share some learnings about what we do well here, lessons learned, and hopefully give you some practical takeaways about how to kind of embed, implement, roll out, scale up your AI use in your organizations. Before we begin today, a little bit of housekeeping. You'll receive the recording for this session and the slides in an email following the session. So by all means, take notes where relevant for you, but you will receive a copy of everything we talk about here today. Also, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box that you should see in your webinar chat. We will do our best to answer them as many of them as we can at the end. We also will be asking for you to complete a feedback survey at the end of the webinar. It's a really useful tool for us to know what is working, what is not working, what is useful for you, to come and spend your time attending. So please do complete the feedback survey for us at the end of the webinar. It's incredibly helpful. And of course, to sweeten the deal, if you've been to a LegalVision webinar before, if you stay until the end, you do get the chance to enter a little bit of a draw to win some Apple AirPods this month. So hopefully that incentivizes you to stay to the end. Also just wanted to flag early up, if anything that we talk about today kind of brings up some ideas or questions about how LegalVision might support you, or if you want to talk about anything further, please do feel free to book in a call with our enterprise team. We'd be more than happy to discuss how we can help reduce your in-house team's workload, give you ideas about how we can best kind of support your teams and your organizations. So please do feel free to leave your contact details in the survey question at the end of the webinar. That makes it really easy for us to get in touch with you. Or of course, please jump onto our website and our contact details are all over there, and our team will be able to reach out to you. Wonderful. Okay, today's session. I do normally run this as a little bit more of a workshop than a webinar. So hopefully we get a lot of questions and interaction in the chat function that I'll keep an eye on. But really today I'm hoping to run us through, obviously what I'm hoping you can get out of the session today, some key principles and some context settings so that we all have an agreed, shared understanding of what we'll be talking about. Then the meat of the session, of course, for us to talk through kind of 7 key strategies about how to put some effective AI implementation into practice into your organizations and teams. Then we'll do a little recap of takeaways, of course, and then save plenty of time at the end for questions. So, what am I hoping that we will get at the end of the session today? I know there can be a lot of different ways that we talk about AI at different organizations. And so in the short amount of time that we have today, I think half an hour to 45 minutes always feels like a lot in the calendar, but it generally whizzes by really quick when we get talking about AI. So I'm hoping first and foremost that we all have a shared understanding and a better understanding about what responsible AI really means, particularly for the legal profession. Within that, maybe to be able to identify some of your AI governance gaps. That might mean that you walk away with a little bit of homework or perhaps a few more questions than answers, but to really identify those areas of improvement or those gaps where we can really start to then put some strategies into place and put some really practical strategies in place to really, as I said, help give you a bit of a kickstart to implement and scale AI tools in your organization. What I like to start with when we look at AI discussions and sessions is to really just take a little bit of time to do some context setting for everyone. If you're anything like me and if you subscribe to 1 or even 2 newsletters, you get peppered, no doubt, with a lot of different articles, points of view, demos, and that contributes, I think, to a lot of AI noise, particularly within the professional services industry. One report that I do keep an eye out for every year is this Thomson Reuters Future of Professionals report. I think they're kind of only 2 or 3 maybe iterations into that report, but I've pinched that little snippet that you can see on the slide there, which sets out from a survey of professionals what are the forces that we perceive to have the highest transformational impact over the coming 5 years. What you can definitely see there is that the rise of AI has taken top spot, I think at least 2 years running in this report, meaning that it really is top of mind for in-house counsel, leaders in organisations, managers, and really across the legal profession. It is something that is occupying a lot of brain space, is something that is in the pipeline that will have a huge impact on how we practice law in the future. What I would also posit and suggest is that the next 2 that also are falling in this survey, explosion in data volumes and velocity of change in the regulatory environment, I would suggest perhaps that they are as high up as they are probably also because of the rise of AI. So explosion in data volumes, everyone here no doubt has heard, or perhaps the phrase would send shivers down your spine to hear about, data-driven decision making. The digital transformation that we've kind of experienced over the last 10, 20 years within the profession has really meant that at this point we have a vast, huge amount of data. And one of the most challenging things that I certainly hear from in-house counsel, other professionals, other lawyers, board members, managers, executives, is that there is a huge amount of data to get through at this point, and identifying the right data points to help drive informed decision making is really tough. That is something I think that is both helped and hindered by the rise of AI. It means we have access to more, and AI can often help us fetch more. It can also help us kind of analyze that more, but it's certainly, I would think, is kind of notched up as high on that list as it is because of the rise of AI. And then, of course, that third spot that you can see there, velocity of change in the regulatory environment. Not a new concept by any means to the legal profession, but really high up currently as well. And I would suggest that that probably is also due to the understanding, acceptance, and anticipation that AI will continue to move and progress. And what that means is that certainly in the coming 5 years, we will expect to see a vast amount of regulatory change in that space. And that certainly, particularly for people who are in in-house counsel roles, leads to a lot of hesitation about what it means and how we can kind of progress change and progress innovation, knowing that regulation might lag behind it. So we'll cover some strategies, hopefully, to kind of address those top 3 bundled together AI-related forces with high kind of transformational impact. But what we can see in some of these reports as well, and in the context more generally, is that the sentiment for the potential of the impact of AI and AI tools is incredibly high. What I'm certainly starting to see now come through is that there is increasingly a bit of a disconnect between the pace of that change and the potential of that change, and teams being able to implement these tools and see results, to really identify where the efficiency gains are, for one, perhaps, or 2, to be able to really scale some of that change so that it aligns with that really positive sentiment about how much change this might have for the profession. So really today, what I'm hoping that we can focus on is ways that we can think about bringing together and aligning more closely that high sentiment and that long-term strategic view of the transformational change of AI, and bringing it closer with your current operations, what you've got in place, the tools that you have in place, so that you can set yourself up to scale when the pace of change, the pace of regulatory change really does start to pick up over the next couple of years. Like everything in our jobs, it is all a balancing act, and I think bringing AI to life is no different. But the more that we can bridge that gap between long-term strategy, present day operations is really what is going to set us up for success, to be able to be ready for that change that we know is coming down the pipe. A few other concepts that I'm hoping that we can all have an agreed, shared understanding of, is the slight difference in how we talk about ethics, philosophy, and responsibility. The reason I put this at the front, to context set, is I think for me in particular, when I have read through a lot of these articles and training materials, these different buckets of concepts, to me at least, take a little while to kind of unpack what people are talking about when they throw these words around. And so for the purposes of today, I would love us to have a shared understanding about what each of these contexts mean. I think philosophy comes into the AI discussion a fair bit. That to me speaks to concepts of fairness, bias, transparency, ownership, and the societal implications of that. To me, that is the should we be using AI questions and the impact on society at large questions. That is not what we're going to be covering today too much. I think that those are really interesting conversations for us to have around the water cooler or at after work drinks. But for the purposes of a session today, that is not where we're going to focus our attention on. Ethics, for the purposes of today, also, and for in the context of the legal profession, I think means something different as well to what perhaps the person on the street might think about ethics. To me, in the context of AI in the legal profession, ethics really reflects and talks to our professional ethical duties. That is our duties to the court, to the client, and to the profession as a whole. And that is a separate session that we run, but looking at how we can maintain our ethical duties as legal professionals is, I think, quite often a separate discussion about the ethical use of AI. What I'm hoping we can focus on in today's session is the responsible use of AI. And when I talk about responsibility around AI, I'm looking at the how questions. How is AI being used to ensure the quality of these outcomes are high quality outcomes? How can we ensure that we have structures in place that means that we have accountability, that we have oversight, and that we understand and we get our arms around how we are using these tools to ensure that we don't expose our organisations or our teams or ourselves to additional risk. I firmly believe that every good presentation includes a random quote from someone on the internet somewhere. And so I've pinched this quote from Michael Impick, who lectures on this at Harvard, because I really think it summarizes and sets the scene really nicely for us about how we're going to talk about this today. And he says that taking a responsible approach to AI allows businesses to deliver results without undermining their mission and values or exposing them to litigation. That, in effect, is really what I'm hoping we can talk about today, and what you'll walk away with today, and some strategies about how you, your teams, and your organizations can take a responsible approach to scaling AI. Taking us back to AI governance, and this really is just a reminder about the importance of thinking about our first principles before we talk about strategies. I think a key part of effective and responsible implementation of AI tools is really closely tied to our first principles of good governance and change management in general. Governance really is there to help you ensure that AI systems are developed, used, and managed responsibly, so that you can really put in place a structure to mitigate risks and then scale effectively and confidently. Now, the reason I kind of put this up front also is just to say that while AI is new and is an emerging technology, it doesn't mean that we need new frameworks and necessarily new tools and strategies to be able to implement and use these new tools. AI governance really goes back to our policies. Are we looking at our strategic planning and how AI is reflected in our strategic planning? Are we looking at our guiding principles of our organisation and our risk framework policies? Are these new tools reflected in those existing things? processes. So does our documentation exist in a way that captures what is going on with AI? Do we have monitoring in place to understand what is going on there? Do we have clear roles and responsibilities when we talk about incident management around incidents that might involve AI tools? And then what are we doing in practice? Do we have the culture, training, education really embedded in our teams and organizations to know that some of these policies and all these processes are happening in practice? These, I don't think, are new concepts to a lot of you who are joining today. I'm certainly not reinventing the wheel in talking about governance in that way, but it is a reminder that we don't need to invent new ways to scale and implement new tools. So I like to think about it, if you think back, all your organizations or teams or you individually has experienced some sort of regulatory reform. Think about how your teams and your organizations have responded to those reforms in the past. You may have responded to them really well, you may have been proactive, you may have been reactive, but those responses to those changes at an organization level tell you what levers that you have in your teams and your organizations to be able to affect change, to see the pace of change, and to see what existing structures are in place to really help you roll out new projects and new tools and new changes and new regulations. So look back at how you've adapted to change and regulations and reforms in the past. Take some lessons learned from that and see how you can apply that to implementing a scalable AI tool or project. Okay, a quick whip through some questions I would love you to think about while we go through the rest of this session. The intention of this is to help you have a think about whether you can identify what your own governance gaps are at your team or for your organizations. These aren't all the questions that you need to be asking yourself, but hopefully that just gets you thinking about where you need to devote some time or attention to be able to get your foundations right, so that, again, your change preparedness is really there when the pace of change really kicks up. When we think about strategic planning, I think it's always really important to go back and align to strategic objectives. When it comes to AI, particularly for leaders and in-house counsel, are you clear and aligned on what strategic objectives you are trying to meet when you look at implementing or testing new AI tools? The reason that I say that up front is it can be really easy to get lost on shiny demos and tools. And I have certainly made that mistake before in signing up to a bunch of demos for different tools. But if you are not clear on what strategic objective that tool is supporting you to meet, it makes it really hard to identify if that is a valuable investment for you and your teams. And it doesn't always need to be that your strategic objective is AI focused. I think there are two ways to think about that when we look at strategic planning. One, you can certainly have a strategic objective as an organization or as a team that says, one of our strategic objectives is to be an industry leader in AI implementation and tooling, or to develop a new market-leading AI strategy or tool or customer experience. That can certainly be a strategic objective for your strategic period. Commonly 3, I see strategic plans less so now 5 years, so generally about 3 years or so. That can certainly be one, and that makes then the AI implementation and testing obviously very clear. What I would like to remind you is that AI is, as we know, a tool, and so the AI can certainly be the answer to how we're going to meet a strategic objective, and to think critically about your current strategic objectives and to see where AI fits into the how are we going to deliver that. And that can really be for a lot of legal teams. For example, we want to bring our internal turnaround time and SLAs down from 5 business days to 3 business days. That can certainly be a strategic objective that you and your teams are trying to meet in a financial year, for example, or in a reporting year. You can turn around then and say, okay, AI can be my how. How am I going to implement that strategic objective? Well, I'm going to test and identify AI tools that help me reduce the review time of our top 3 our top 3 reviewed contracts or our most reviewed contracts, or the contracts that we know take the most time. To have a really specific how of how an AI tool will meet this broader goal really helps you maintain focus and, I suppose, in effect, not waste your time on demos for tools that really won't, at the end of the day, shift the dial for you. So if your answer to that first question was no, I don't know if I'm aligned in how I'm implementing AI with strategic objectives, go back and find your team or your organization's strategic plan. If you don't have one for your team, is it time that you think about putting some strategic objectives in place for a certain period of time, and having your what statements and then your how statements, and seeing where AI can fit into that strategic plan can really help clarify some of that big picture thinking. When we're talking about risk management, are you clear on the business's risk appetite for AI implementation? And are you clear what use cases you can test that won't impact business continuity at large? Again, in-house counsel and the legal profession and legal leaders do this all the time when it comes to contract negotiation, for example. You are very clear on your negotiating positions. You are clear on your risk appetite to agree or push back on certain contract terms. Can you start having that same sense of understanding when it comes to your AI experimentation? Do we know where we can push and pull and do a little bit of experimentation or be a little bit safe to fail, because we as a business have agreed that we have a higher risk appetite to test this because it aligns with the strategic objective? If not, can you go back and think about, well, should I be developing a risk appetite statement for how we approach our AI testing? That'd be a really useful starting point to clarify where you can kind of go off and find a demo, and where you might have buy-in to be able to get that investment off the ground, and where perhaps it's a little bit too risky for now because it impacts business continuity, and that's not where we want to test right now on new tools, for example. That, again, just helps clarify what tools will be appropriate for you and what tools may not be appropriate for you. I'm keeping an eye on time and I'm doing terribly for time. Incident management. Do your current data breach response plans and your privacy data flows already contemplate the process for testing AI tools? So not only integrating these tools and the impact that they have on your cyber infrastructure and your data infrastructure, but do those response plans, do those current policies contemplate how you're going to test new tools and what that looks like for your team? If your answer to that is no, again, a useful starting point might be for you to go back to your existing frameworks and start to include AI business impact as well as some recovery analysis in things like your data breach response plan. Again, when we think a little bit more operationally for you to think about, do you have clear roles and responsibilities? Do you know who is responsible, accountable, who should be consulted, who needs to be informed when we're talking about AI implementation, testing, and scale? For a lot of in-house counsel, I hear when we talk about, developing a RACI matrix, for example, that they are everyone on the RACI matrix. But that is a good test for you to say, okay, I need to go further afield. I need to bring the tech team in. I need to bring our data or cyber team in and really start to build a little consortium of people with roles and responsibilities about how we're going to manage, implement, scale, respond to AI incidents and AI tooling. And then monitoring and management. Do you have the data that you need to make those data-driven decisions, to give you oversight about how the tools are being used, to really understand the trends that are occurring within your teams with respect to some of the strategic objectives that you're trying to meet? And do you have that data on hand to be able to report on results meaningfully? Again, if not, a starting point for you might be looking at your team's current KPIs and working backwards and seeing, okay, do I have any AI data or are there any points in that process where we are touching AI, and can I map my AI data against some of those existing KPIs? It's not always about making new KPIs. It's about seeing how it all kind of fits together in this new world of having AI data and AI processes embedded in your workflows. I know that that was a lot, but hopefully that just kind of rattles loose some questions for you to have a little think about as we move through some of these strategies. The idea of this is hopefully if you've identified or answered no to a couple of these questions, that you can pick up the right strategy to go away and start putting into place and giving you some practical tips for the particular governance gap that is relevant to you and your business. An acknowledgement really that that means when we talk about AI implementation for in-house counsel, you are all things and wear all hats, but particularly get comfortable with being a governance architect and moving now, I think, from experimenting to building and really embedding new frameworks. Being in a cycle of experimentation is kind of great for understanding kind of what's out there, but being that architect that moves to building a framework around that is really the next step to be able to scale and be ready for change. You're, of course, also the strategic advisor. What we're seeing a lot with our in-house counsel clients is that boards are asking the questions before the regulators are. Unsurprisingly, regulators are a little bit laggy with respect to standing up regulations or guidance around this. And what we're seeing for a lot of our organizations is that it is top of mind for boards before it is a compliance issue. So being a strategic advisor around that and understanding the potential risks and the frameworks that we're putting in place really stands you in good stead. And of course, for in-house counsel and lawyers generally, you are that risk gatekeeper. So you become that guide to risk posturing now. I think, again, we've moved from being kind of the one that keeps the finger on the pulse. We're not quite there at full scale and implementation for most organizations. Where we're at now is certainly how are organizations posturing to potential risk before we're just talking about compliance down the track when we get regulations or compliance with existing requirements. How are we looking at posturing our organizations and our teams to be risk averse, if that's what you want to be, but what is our position on our risk towards AI? That often sits within in-house counsel and legal leaders. And so my tip there is certainly to become comfortable and acknowledge that these are three hats that you will indefinitely wear when it comes to AI implementation for a team or business. Okay. I will try to whiz through some of these strategies. I'm just checking that we don't have any questions. But strategy one, we're not reinventing the wheel. Create AI visibility for you and your teams. Certainly one of the biggest risks to organizations is unmanaged AI. And what I mean by that is kind of nascent users or kind of people using AI without you knowing about it. It is really hard to manage and build a framework around something that you can't see. So when we're moving from experimentation to scale, think about really crude or rudimentary ways that you can centralize your use of AI tools so that you have visibility about what you and your teams and the business are using. Obviously, if there are ways that you can at an infrastructure level limit that, then that is a little bit more secure. But I have seen teams do something as simple as starting an AI tool register that says, hey guys, I'd like you to dump onto this spreadsheet what AI tools that you're using so we can all kind of share and understand what we're using. You getting that lay of the land is really helpful to know how you can build the framework, start to tell the team, actually, we don't want to be using that platform. We're more comfortable with us using these, and really start to get your arms around what the AI tools that are currently being used in your team and what information is being uploaded and processed to those different platforms. Strategy two, very much, I think we've talked about this a fair bit, but be very clear on the problem that you want to solve. Being able to identify and prioritize your team's specific pain points in your existing workflows really helps you to find the right tool. What I kind of mean by that is that it is useful for you to know when you go and look at these different AI tools, this is a tool that means that we would have to entirely change our current process in order for that tool to work. In order for you to make that call, you need to understand your team's pain points, the current processes, and how much push and pull you have to change those processes. Compare that with a tool that slots into an existing process that makes one part of that process a little bit slicker, quicker, or more efficient. Those are two slightly different things and will mean something a little bit different to how you implement, roll out, and do that change management piece in your teams. And so you need to know the problem that you're trying to solve and be very clear on your team's pain points and where AI can slot into that or redesign that for you and your teams. I've said it once and I'll say it again. AI overload happens really quickly. So being clear on the problem you want to solve really also helps you manage your time when it comes to sales pitches and demos. If you are able to turn around to these service providers and say, this is the problem I'm trying to solve and this is the workflow I expect it to fit into, you can really quickly identify the service providers, the platforms that might not be right for you, or identify the service providers that can help build their tools around your existing team, for example. And an additional tip there is just certainly to leverage learnings from other external partners who have done some of the heavy lifting for you. Talk to other people, hear what other people have tested, leverage what other people have said doesn't work or demos that they've done and not gone ahead with to identify if that would be the same outcome for you and your teams. We certainly do this a lot. If you've been to any of our other events where we've kind of run AI workshops, the point of a lot of these is for us to be able to share the heavy lifting that we have done as a tech firm and a team about what we have found does and doesn't work for some of these legal workflows. And that can really, again, just help position you and save some time really at the end of the day. Strategy 3, very much define what success looks like, especially when you are engaging those external providers. Consider what those success metrics look like beyond just cost saving, and really clarify what your desired outcomes are early. So you can, of course, cost saving is one of them, but are you looking at quality, faster turnaround times, improving sentiment and engagement in a team? Think about what that means kind of more broadly than just kind of cost or direct ROI on a balance sheet, and communicate what those success metrics look like, not only to the service providers, but to the people who will be using those tools, so that you can really collect some quality feedback from the people who will be using those tools. So you can identify if the investment to a tool, some development is really worth it, and see if you can really align or embed those metrics of success with any of the existing reporting that you do. Strategy 4, establish your governance guardrails. I've harped on about this a lot in today's session, but confidence and clarity in your AI governance really only helps to build confidence over time. It is not always the case that you can pick a new tool up and you'll be kind of ready to go and it'll revolutionize everything that you're doing in your organization. Sometimes getting the foundations right, which is going back to our governance first principles, reviewing our existing policies and how they reflect where we think we're going with AI and what we want our teams to know, is one of the biggest drivers of success, so that when the right tool comes along, you have everything in place and you've got your guardrails in place. A key point to that is communicating, approved tools, approved use cases, current guardrails to everyone in your team and organization. What that should look like is people need to be aware of what the escalation pathways are. For example, if there's an incident, do they know who they should go to if a data incident occurs and it's in relation to AI? On the flip side of that, do they know who they should go to if they've got a great idea about that and where it should go? And so think about your internal suite currently of governance documents and make sure that they are fit for AI purpose going forward. Strategy 5, review your precedent agreements. Certainly clarity in your technology procurement contracts will really be critical to scale going forward. Again, this isn't going away, and I have very rarely seen a one-size-fits-all AI tool, which means over time you will have several providers potentially providing you with AI tools and solutions. So a consistent understanding of what your own contractual positions are on data usage, training models, will really help with your contract management going forward. And that really, of course, should align with that risk appetite that we talked about earlier and what your own technology environment kind of looks like. Again, it helps you with your negotiation positions. It helps you have a consistent understanding of what you're asking of these service providers, so that going forward, you're not kind of reactively trying to work out where your data is going or what your position on that is. If you know that now going forward, you can very quickly move and engage providers that align with those risk positions for you. I'm mindful of time. Strategy 6, redefine the performance expectations of your team. A big piece of AI implementation and scale is about culture and training. And that is going to be a challenge for us in the legal industry. Ensuring that quality of work and the maintenance of those professional standards, and you would have no doubt seen through many different court cases and articles, in this new world of AI, ensuring that quality piece requires you to go back and redefine expectations with your team. If we take it as a certainty and an expectation that people will use AI to be quicker and better at their jobs, you should be able to be very clear about how you expect junior lawyers or other members in your team or your business to be using those tools. And training your team to be responsible and accountable for that AI use takes time and thinking and a culture reset, and how you're fostering that open environment of sharing AI wins, being safe to fail, identifying what your losses are, areas of improvement, really requires you to bring your people along with you. So put in place things like supervision frameworks or performance frameworks that really champion AI use, AI transparency. I talk to people all the time that kind of say sometimes, it takes me just as long to review a junior's work when they've used AI because I don't know what they've looked at, and it's kind of a little bit messy, and it's just easier or quicker for me to do it myself or tell them not to use AI. And it's just about rethinking what that looks like for you and your teams and what the expectations are. So, for example, can you start to ask your juniors, when you give me a piece of work or advice, can you also show me what AI prompts you used to get there? That way you can review it and kind of see, well, I can see what they've asked AI and why AI has given them that response. To me, that is no different than when I was a junior lawyer and my job was to put in the in tray my advice and behind it everything that I relied on and the case law behind it, so that the partner reviewing it could see everything that I relied on to get to my end product. Think about how you're doing that for your teams in the world of AI now. Is it, hey, can you send me the key prompts that you used and relied on to get to this outcome, so that I can see when I review what the gaps are and if we need to re-pivot or re-prompt or ask something else because we've got a gap there in how we've approached the question. So rethink about those performance expectations for you and your team. Strategy 7, this is the last one. Keep an eye out on the regulatory landscape. Regulation has been fragmented to date, but it will start to move more and more quickly. You can see the Australian government resources, the federal government in particular, those standards for AI transparency and what they expect of government agencies is not necessarily what you need to comply with from a compliance perspective, but gives you that high watermark of how the government's thinking about it. So can be a good indicator of how you need to prepare. Without AI-specific legislation right now, we will see it in the rest of the regulatory environment. We've seen it in privacy, copyright, and employment. And so just keep an eye out on how the kind of fragmented regulations are approaching AI, what types of information are being considered high risk and kind of pinged. Law Society, of course, will continue to issue guidance on how we're expected to do that as a legal profession and what our responsibilities are. And then looking further afield to other jurisdictions is really helpful. I would be very surprised if our Australian legislators didn't look to the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, for example, that is in place when they're looking to draft the Australian regulations around this. So going through the thinking in other jurisdictions where something's already in place and what that guidance looks like, if you're able to answer questions, if you look at the standard for AI transparency that government's released, for example, and if you're able to, in your head, kind of answer the requirements, you're in a good position, for example, to be able to whip one together if tomorrow they said, actually, everyone who is an APP entity needs to publish a standard for AI transparency. If you've already thought about that and started to look at that or know where your gaps are and being able to pull that together, it just means you can be a little bit proactive in how you respond to potential regulatory change. Okay, that was it for me. I'm going to try to leave at least 5 minutes for questions. Our key takeaways really is that responsible implementation builds risk into the process. There is not going to be an AI solution for your teams that will be perfect and completely risk-free. So you and your team really need to be on the same page about what responsible risks are that you can take and have frameworks in place to address and mitigate those changes. Define your success before you look to scale. When you again move from that experimentation phase to implementation, and then when you really look to scale that up, you need to have a clear problem to solve and some really clear expected outcomes and KPIs so that you identify and understand what success looks like. Having a generic approach to it will give you generic results at the end of the day. And again, a reminder just that good governance is there to enhance scalable change. It might feel like it slows it down when you're kind of down in the weeds of looking at processes and policies, but it is not intended to slow it down. It is intended to put in place the right foundations so that your scalable change is responsible, you've got your arms around it, and you're very comfortable that risks have been mitigated and you are not exposing you or your teams to additional litigation or risks when we look at implementation of AI solutions. Okay, that was by and large it for us today and brings us to the end of today's session. I just wanted to flag up on the screen here, you might find this publication useful that LegalVision has published on notifiable data breaches. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to a download for that. We've got an upcoming webinar as well coming up. You might be interested in it. It's for employer-sponsored visas. And so looking at some of our immigration practice leader will be here talking about common issues and how to manage employer-sponsored visas. So please register for that if that is of interest to you. And then just a quick reminder about LegalVision's desk extension product. We will get to questions in 1 minute. So while you send them through, please send them through. A quick word on our desk extension. We speak to in-house counsel all the time. We know you're under pressure to balance all those different hats, strategic input, executive at the executive level, a really heavy load of day-to-day matters with tight budgets and in a really tough labour market. So our desk extension has been purpose-built as a service to really help handle those business as usual needs. We're really here to boost your team's capacity so that you can be freed up to think about this bigger picture AI stuff, to think about your strategic plans, to think about these big picture frameworks. Our lawyers are really trained to embed themselves in your businesses and to work as that extension of your team's legal function. So if you are interested in learning more, please share your details at the survey at the end of this webinar and our team can reach out to you if you have any questions about our desk extension product. Okay, while I'm having a look at answering some of the questions in the time that we have left, you will see a poll pop up in the Zoom. We'd love it if you could please take a second to just answer that poll so we can get a little bit of a grasp on kind of how you are handling your kind of day-to-day legal needs. Okay, let me have a quick look at questions. We had a question submitted. Many organisations have responsible AI principles on paper. What does operationalising those principles look like in practice? Which is a great question that we get all the time. Again, governance really means nothing. The processes and the policies mean nothing without the people and the cultural change. So the implementation piece to policies and principles on paper is that training piece and is that communication piece. So how are you and your teams embedding those expectations and understanding? Is it that we need regular training on what those policies look like? And how are we having a constant kind of feedback loop to know that those policies and processes are happening on the ground? And that people understand what our expectation is around these AI principles. Okay, I'm going to whiz through. Let me see. How should we measure success when scaling AI? Efficiency, revenue, impact, or something else? It really depends on, I suppose, what your organisation is really looking for. We're looking at reporting on AI. For example, a metric can certainly be, we actually just want engagement and uptake of AI to be increased around the business. So what does that look like for you and your teams? Revenue impact is a big one and is a longer, I guess, kind of chain to look at top to bottom. It is not always the case that an AI tool will directly kind of have a revenue impact. And so to identify really clearly what ROI do you expect of an implementation of AI? What are you defensively saying is the metric that AI is helping you achieve? Is that turnarounds? Is that increased profitability? Or is that efficiency that might not be attached to a dollar figure? Is that future workforce planning? Does that mean, what we expect to see in our modeling and the impact of AI is that, our workforce modeling and our headcount might look different going into the future. And so measures of success should really align to your current reporting, what your board cares about and what your strategic objectives are, and looking at how AI can slot into kind of driving some of that success. Okay, I'm mindful of time. So I think that's all the time we have for today's session. Apologies if I didn't get to your questions. If you submit your details at the survey at the end, we can certainly get back to any questions that we didn't answer and get back to you. But please leave your details to learn more about how our membership can help you. And while this is a free webinar, we really do value your feedback. So please do complete the survey at the end. It really helps us out. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time, and good luck scaling AI in your businesses. Thank you, everyone.